Alright, another draft. No. Yeah, no, this one's a Do Not God video production or something. Inmendum video, whatever. Response video of sorts, maybe. Matt Dillahunty. So, context, I don't know. So, yeah, he's been for years making pretty good arguments defending atheism. But sort of in the generic sense, in the sense that it's not a replacement philosophy. He sort of does this, morality is some sort of thing we make up, kind of garbage. No kind of argument explaining any kind of real consequences of atheism. Just this idea of anti-theism, more or less. He's an anti-theist, which is a good thing to be, but it's not enough in terms of recognizing that there's a consequence to evolution being the truth and the universe being stupid, in the sense that there's no intelligent design. So the absence of an intelligent creator has a logical consequence, pointing out that the design isn't necessarily, or by any default logic, can the design be expected to be profitable or functional in some sort of reasonable way, because it's so much easier to make failure than it is to make success. And so without a creator, the universe is going to make more failure than success. And we ought to analyze our own existence and figure out its failure, which these atheists do not do. So in a sense, I'm going to be arguing, my biggest argument is they take no responsibility for their atheism, no responsibility for recognizing what evolution means as a fact. And it's a brutal fact to accept what goes on in nature. So the next step of reasoning would just be, well, what is the consequence? So there's no intelligent design, fine. What is the design? And I would argue that the way to think about it is to think about a bunch of mice in a maze. And let's say the maze was just a contrived pile of nonsense, a circular story of you consume stuff, you make more mice, and then you get killed, and the system just keeps grinding up mice. Just makes a bloody mess out of the mice in the end. And they have certain little reward and punishments that get them through the maze, in the sense that they take away the whip, they take away the brutality, give you little pain pills now and then to make you feel good, and you'll keep chasing those pills. And so as mice in this maze, we're in the circumstance where we got smart enough where we could do some vocabulary, build some language, and be able to communicate what's going on in our lives, and talk about it. And the conversation should logically evolve into some conversation about, well, should we keep feeding this maze? I mean, why are we doing what we're doing? Should we keep doing it? Should we keep falling into the same traps over and over and over and over again in terms of behavioral traps, and pretend that we're accomplishing something when there's nothing being accomplished here as far as anybody can really see, except for a bunch of mice getting killed. That seems to be the dominant function, is to kill stuff. Make stuff, break stuff. Make stuff, break stuff. Make stuff, break stuff. No real good reason. It's just a hammer hitting a glass over and over again, just no point. So anyway, and this is what these atheists fail to deal with any of the real consequences of the subject. So the subject is that we as human beings can not only think, but we feel. And we know that the animals are not doing the thinking thing on a very high level, but they're certainly doing the feeling thing on a high level. They're being rewarded and punished, just as we are, and just as we were, a few 100,000 years ago, and doing it in ignorance. And nobody would think torturing a human being 200,000 years ago was like torturing nothing. They would realize it would be just as bad as torturing something now. A person, the brain had all the same functional parts, it just wasn't educated. It just didn't go to high school, didn't know mathematics. And that's all the animals lack, is knowledge of mathematics and the high school stuff. And so this is a brutal game being played. The fact is that if you can eat other organisms, other mammals, imprison them, torture them, kill them for food, then you might as well be eating human beings. It's no difference. Children, anyway. Children are just as dumb as animals in many respects. So your morality is despicable and ugly. You know, and you should be obliged to account for it. That's your real philosophy. That's what you're really saying. Yeah, it is the same thing. It's only some sort of human prejudice or delusion that keeps us from, I mean, if we could truly profit from killing children, we probably would do it. And that's the facts. And that just points out that you're just driven by your desire and nothing else. There's no reasoning behind what you're doing. You're just you're just like an animal. You're just behaving based on the rewards and the punishments that are in front of you, and that's it. You're not thinking about it at all. So, yeah, so my general impression is he's just like all the other typical atheists. They think they've done something brilliant by figuring out there's no God, which is basically saying, I don't believe in fables. And they think that's a really huge accomplishment. Somehow you got to be smart to do that. You know, no, it's pretty, that's a pretty low standard to have for the definition of smart. You're still in the dumb category until you figure out that evolution has a consequence, that the only thing that really matters in terms of the value, the only thing that has value in this whole stinking universe is the value of pain and suffering. Everything else only has value tangential, I mean, consequentially, based on the fact that you can hurt something. And if you can't hurt anything, then it can't possibly have any significance. An event doesn't mean anything if it will not change whether something feels good or something feels bad. Fact. And in fact, they ignore. And they do it for no good reason except it's more socially, it's more comfortable to their conditioning. You know, that's it. Their personal preference based on their conditioned desires and notions of gratification and ego accomplishment, but it has no reasoned, there's nothing you can defend rationally in anything this idiot will say. Yeah, I'll call him an idiot.
Answering antinatalism. This video actually came about because of an email that I received from someone just this past week, but it's something that's been living in my head for quite a long time. As an atheist, I tend to deal pretty much 50-50 at this point between answering and addressing religious claims and objections to secular morality or the existence of God and things like that, and then dealing with atheists who are wanting to address various philosophical concepts or social issues.
Right, well, that's the two sides of the argument, right, is that the not believing in God is one part of the problem. The second part of the problem was what does people replace it with? So even the atheists end up still being a kind of theist because they're still accepting notions that were given to them by theology, like morality and all of this other stuff, when really the morality is just a value equation, and you're saying, is there a reasonable way to deduce value? And sort of like... whatever his name is, the philosopher of the last decade, talks on all these subjects, the moral landscape guy. You know, he'll point out that, yes, you can make a rational argument for value in the sense that we know what has value, we feel it, we experience it. There's this qualia stuff, and that's the stuff that value is made out of. Again, if you can't hurt something, if you can't cause it suffering, then the event can't be consequentially meaningful. If it doesn't change how feeling things feel, it can't possibly have value.
Talking about the how and why we go through certain things. Like just today, somebody briefly joined the Atheist Community of Austin's Facebook page just to basically say, why is there a community at all? It seems like a community demonstrates a weakness, like you can't do this on your own, and why would I need a community? And I quickly pointed out and replied back, basically, you're posting, I'm going to come into your community in order to explain to you why I don't think I need community and why you shouldn't either.
Well, the only way you could argue with a community is to argue with the community. So I don't know how else he was supposed to send the message to you except in this form, you know. So, but yeah, certainly the only argument for a community is that somehow you can gain some sort of productive advantages through community, and that's the argument, though. how often do you gain constructive advantage, and how often do you turn into the Democratic Party and end up being a pile of shit that nobody could vote for? So your community doesn't mean anything if your community, isn't going to be able to pool its resources to do something truly productive. Communities often become, charities, for example. The bigger they get, the less efficient they get.
The post is self-refuting. You could not express that sentiment without coming into a community to do it. Because even those of us who are perhaps the most antisocial are still pretty much social creatures. I'm right, and I need somebody to know.
Yeah, so I don't know what this has to do with answering antinatalism, this little tritey puke about some sort of people need people kind of bullshit, which is just sort of bullshit. It's just a practical fact that mobs have power, individuals have none. It's just a fact. If you can form yourself into a mob, you can force the world to deal with you. Just like if you're, the whole Donald Trump argument. If you're rich enough, you can lose all the money you want, because no one's going to drive you bankrupt because they want to get their money back. They want to get some of it back. But if you're poor and it's not a huge amount of money that they're losing, they'll kill you. And that's just the truth. So yes, being part of a mob is a huge advantage. But the argument is, how often are the mobs doing anything good? And that's the problem. To make yourself a mob, you have to sell your soul to a bunch of devils. And you end up with a bunch of assholes with hammers. And that's no good either.
Well, I'm right. I'm weak, and I need the help from someone who's weak, but I don't want to be belittled for being weak. There are lots of reasons for community. There are lots of reasons, not just because we are social creatures. There are real...
Well, again, you can say we're social creatures, but we're social in some very negative ways. We're very nepotistic creatures, so you want to call that being social? I don't think so. We're very tribal, we're very racist and nationalistic. All that kind of stuff grows right out of all of this. So to say we're very social doesn't really saying anything when the society is made out of your own brothers and sisters, for example. Bullshit. That's not society. So in my opinion, we're very antisocial. People are extremely dysfunctional in social groups. Nobody on my street gives a shit about anybody else on my street. Nobody, I mean, they live next to people for a decade. They don't even know each other's names. For social creatures, that's not very good evidence of us being social creatures. That's pretty good evidence that we're antisocial.
Benefits to it outside of just general, ancestral psychology. We are the descendants of social creatures and stuff. There are truly beneficial things to our psyche. There's also people who are fine on their own, somewhat. I don't know how many people are truly fine on their own for long periods of time.
Yeah, I'm fantastic all by myself. I'm just fantastic, okay? Give me rubber people, mannequins, that would be fine. This little flat, synthetic, pixelated humans like you, that's good with me too. Fine, excellent. That's all the people I need, frankly. Y'all suck in some way or another. Frankly, in person, y'all suck.
The people who end up in a cabin in the woods for 20 years, I'm not sure that they're particularly stable. They may think they're fine.
Yeah, well, you're not going to cite any real evidence or any real studies demonstrating how they're right and they're wrong or anything. So, you gotta use some sort of reasoned argument. And I don't think you're going to have one. So, fail, mostly.
But in the process of having these conversations, a lot of cool subjects come up. And some of them are philosophical exercises. I want to sit around and think about the big questions in life, like identity. What makes...
That's all kind of horseshit, identity, all that kind of bullshit. We're robots. All you're saying is my programming more legitimate than your programming? That's a pointless argument in any other context than first understanding what we are measuring. Are we measuring who can jump higher, or whose head can reflect as more light, or what are we measuring? And if we're not measuring anything that matters, in terms of what's going to lead to a less pain and suffering or less waste, a more economical outcome by some kind of rational standard. So your rational standard of economics is, well, I only tortured a few people without their consent. That's okay, right? That guy over there says it's okay. My mother says it's okay for me to torture some people. And I would argue that no, you didn't get consent to do any of that. You don't have any right to do any of that. Any torture is bad. Any imposition that's completely unnecessary, completely by your volition and no other necessity. Nothing besides your need dictated that the problem happen. The violation of consent happened. The only thing saying the violation should happen is your desire. Nothing else. No reasoned argument that the world's a better place because I'm in it. Those arguments aren't going to be made, so you fail dismally in doing logic.
Me, or possession and property. Can I actually own anything? What does it mean? Some of these delve into political ideologies, libertarian views on this, or Republican or conservative views on this.
Yeah, some things are social constructs, okay? They're just a social contract. They exist only because, as a pragmatic, practical matter, you have to have some kind of agreement to be able to live together. So you could argue that there's plenty of people that need killing. I might agree, you might agree that a lot of people need assassinating. We could have a list and we'd have a lot of the same people on the list. To kill them, the world's a better place. Just a fact. But we can also understand that if everybody's allowed to compile their list and everybody's allowed to exercise their list, then none of us are going to be alive because we're going to be on somebody else's list. And so you make a social deal to say, oh, okay, it's neutral. There's no value to be dictated here. We're not going to make those decisions. We're not going to make those judgments in any kind of way that could matter. Now, we can say it. We can voice our opinion that the world would be a better place if so-and-so was dead. Because it's a fact. Okay, you can defend it logically and factually. You can defend how the model works better without that fucking bad cog in it. You can take things out of the device that are making it dysfunctional. It's a truth.
Democratic, progressive views on this, etc. There's a question about who and what we are.
Right. So if you want to get to the truth, then you argue the truth through some other, in some other better context than social contracts, and you start making real arguments about what the facts are. What is accomplished by the human race? Is there any need satisfied by our existence? Is the universe in some way deprived if we don't exist? Is there any evidence that the universe is clearly in a dysfunctional or negative state because there are no Martians? Can I make some possible argument that somehow the universe needs to have Martians? Because without Martians, it's a lesser place. It's ineffective. It's dysfunctional. It's diminished in some substantial way. Is that really a rational argument? And the argument I would make to you, it's not possible to make a reasoned argument defending any such proposition. The universe is just fine without Venetians and Martians and Plutonians and Uranians and all of this bullshit. It doesn't need any of them. None of them will accomplish anything. And if you really statistically look at what they're doing, they're just making a bloody fucking mess. And that's what the human race has done. It's killed people horribly and brutally. It's brutalizing the environment, brutalizing the animals that live in that environment, making their lives even worse, diminishing the quality of existence, period. And that's all humans have done. It's all they're capable of doing, is fucking up something that's already a bad game, playing a bad game badly. That's your only fucking accomplishment, you stupid dumb shit. You retarded robot. Do some rational, logical thinking. If you can't defend the existence, if you can't defend the proposition that we should put Martian people on Mars, we should plant life on Mars, if you can't rationally defend that proposition, then you can't defend the proposition we're existing in now, dumbass. And I'm sure you can't come up with any reasoned, rational reasons to sit there and inject some bacteria on the surface of Mars. You will not be able to defend that Mengelesque experiment. I need to start evolution on Mars so I can create billions and trillions and gazillions of animal organisms eating each other. It's Mengele thoughts. Those are Mengele ideas. They're retarded. They're stupid. You fail to do logic.
Takes on a bunch of different forms. There's a legitimate concern, and I say legitimate seriously, that some people, after finding their way out of religion, will slip into nihilism.
You're the asshole doing that. You're the asshole who's saying that it doesn't matter if I torture shit. Torture is good. It's fun. It's productive. Lots of good things are made out of this slavery and this torture that I'm perpetrating. You're the asshole nihilist. You're the one who's annihilated the only thing that really matters, and that is the welfare of feeling creatures. You're the one failing to see the only thing that has any fucking value. Your stupid notions of accomplishment, your stupid notions that I'm great because I could jump over a 5-foot bale of hamburgers. No, no, you're not great. That's a delusion you have in your stupid fucking head. All right? Jeez.
They will get to the point where they recognize that, as far as they can tell, the universe doesn't care about them at all. The universe has no intrinsic value or purpose for them, and this means that
they're more horseshit than anybody's looking for a purpose. Okay, they can see that right, and they can measure that in their own life right in front of them. They can just sit there and say, "Oh, is the world a better place with me in it?" I mean, there's dopey movies like It's a Wonderful Life, you know, that almost everybody's obliged to watch just because it's cultural fodder. But it's a kind of an interesting thought experiment, is to just spend a second or two of your existence contemplating, well, who would be better off if I didn't exist? Well, the guy who would have married my wife was probably better off. You know, you could start just imagining how the world could be in a better place if you weren't fucking messing it up. If you didn't make a mess on this fucking goddamn planet. It's just the truth. You don't need any complex philosophical perspective to sit there and just figure out for a moment, am I really accomplishing anything? Am I a good guy? Am I a bad guy? You can measure that right in front of you. You can see it right in front of you. Am I a taker or am I a giver? You can see it. It's not hidden from you.
Life doesn't have any intrinsic value or meaning or purpose. And then they will extend this to, therefore, life doesn't have any value, meaning, or purpose. And I'll interject here to say, yes.
Yes, you're the assholes who are doing that. You're the assholes who are pretending there isn't a logical consequence here, that you can't add up the 2 + 2 logic. It's so fucking obvious. I know my feelings matter. I mean, I know it's really important that I'm not tortured. So obviously, if something else is being tortured, that's a bad thing. It's not bad because it happens to me. It's bad because it exists in a conscious sentient being. And unless I have some deluded perspective that everybody else is synthetic and I'm the only real thing in the universe, which would be insanely deluded, more deluded than being religious, then there's no way to make any sense out of playing this stupid game, because it's a game where you're going to have to steal somebody else's welfare to have your own. Fuck you. You can't win, asshole, because the game is made out of other people's bones and blood.
It does. We're the ones that give it that. We are the value creators.
So more horseshit. Our capacity to feel is the only thing that has value. And every single thing that can feel, it is a creator of value. So we create value by having experiences. But the fact that we'll sit there and say, I'm worth it, that doesn't mean anything. You have to prove you're worth it. You have to prove the value by explaining how you're somehow accomplishing something. That in your own life you are personally had more happiness than tragedy, and that in your interactions with the rest of the people on this planet, that somehow you've made them more comfortable, you've made more people comfortable than you have made uncomfortable, or that you have caused discomforts that weren't impositions, where you took their comfort and decided to put it someplace else without their consent.
Creating machines. We care about things because we care about them, and that's what gives them value. It doesn't
mush. We care about them because that's what we care about them. That's just mush talk. The point is there's rational ways to exist and there's irrational ways to exist. So obviously, as a vampire, I can't use that. I can't just say because I'm a vampire, I'm allowed to suck other people's blood and steal their life. I can't just make that argument. I have to actually explain why I'm worth it. So again, you're not taking any responsibility for the price of your fucking goddamn thing called existence. You have to not only defend your existence in the context of the world you live in, you have to defend the existence of existence if you're going to defend it. You have to defend all that it creates, not just the parts you like. You have to defend the price paid. And the first price is you're doing it against consent, which is a fundamental non-starter right there. As soon as you're saying, I'm going to make a rat maze game and I'm not going to give the rats consent to participate. I'm going to force them to play the game I'm choosing to force them to play. Well, you've already violated all kinds of ethical codes and all kinds of rational ethics because you wouldn't allow yourself to be subjected to the same bullshit. You don't want some other asshole sitting there putting strings on you and making them your puppet. You would say, no, I want a law against that. Nobody gets to put strings on me and make me their puppet. So you know that's already an ethical violation because you wouldn't allow anybody else to do the same to you, jackass.
It doesn't matter if the universe cares about human life. It doesn't matter if the universe has a meaning or purpose. It doesn't even matter if, in fact, there is a God who has a meaning and purpose for my life. My life has whatever meaning and purpose I give it.
Bullshit. Okay, there's a factual context of your existence. You can't pretend I get to make up what's blood and what's not blood. I get to make up what's real pain and what's not pain. No, you don't get to make it up. You have to defend your statements as being consistent with the evidence, consistent with what's obviously observable. And you can't defend this idea that I get to say. No, you don't get to say. All you can do is testify to what you feel and what you think, okay? But you cannot assert something else to be true besides what you can defend. You can't defend these fake values.
From my perspective, and my life might also have meaning and purpose from somebody else's perspective. And certainly, I value other people's lives. There are people who value my life, etc.
Right, all mush. All has nothing to do with the truth. So what you tell each other, oh, you look marvelous. You think that means something? You think that's real? No, you have to prove the person's marvelous.
This takes on a couple of strange forms. One is the movement that's known as the voluntary human extinction movement. And essentially, they are advocating that humans are a terrible blight on the universe, and the best thing we can do is allow for humans to go extinct. And so they're going to argue for this, not necessarily by advocating for the mass suicide and intentional destruction of the human race, but by, let's just stop breeding.
Well, we're already doing that, right? So the intelligent people are already doing it. So you're pretending it's some sort of bizarre concept when it's what intelligent people already do on purpose. Intelligent people aren't stupid enough to say, I want to be a babysitter. That's a great career move for me. No, they think of something better to do with their fucking life. And then tried to be a human creator. Oh yeah, I read the How to Make a Perfect Human book, and so I'm really knowledgeable on the subject, so I'll take on this huge challenge of being responsible for everything that happens to something. And that I have to make the person into something, which means I have to build its character, which means I sort of have to beat the shit out of it, with real life examples so that I can humiliate it and destroy its character and beat down its ego and do all this crap so I can create some kind of humble, responsible, decent human being who has a bunch of inhibitions and a bunch of, limitations on its freedom, built upon the fact that I've imposed character, human decency on them. Oh, yeah, who wants to do that as a job? Only an imbecile would want that as a job, right? So anybody who has any kind of brains at all says, no, that's not what I want to do with my fucking goddamn life. But yes, the human extinction movement is retarded because they're just a bunch of self-hating humans who think humans made the problems in the world, like humans invented the cannibalism that's in nature, or humans invented competition, or humans didn't invent any of it, you dumbasses. That's what nature made, you dumbasses. So you don't give it back to nature because then you're just torturing animals with a dumb system. They're just resentful because we're supposed to have a smart system, and our smart system looks as bad as the natural dumb system. And so they say, kill the humans because they're being stupid. Well, it's true. They're being pretty fail. They have all these neurons and all this intelligence, and yet they can't do anything better with it than be selfish cunts. So yeah, they probably should be killed just for that. Okay? But the big picture is the default was no good. Anything that would have taken our place, if rhinoceroses got smart first, or platypuses, or homing pigeons, it wouldn't have mattered. They all would have become assholes until they became intelligent enough to realize they're just stupid robots playing a stupid game over and over and over again, and it's so fucking redundant, and they all don't know it because they all die. Okay, so they can't tell each other from the deathbed, oh, you're just doing the same thing we've been doing for 1,000,000 years. Fuck it, it's a stupid game. You won't win in the end. Okay, it's going to be horrible failure in the end. And that's all you'll be known for. It's your last stinky fart is all that's really going to be left.
There's an offshoot of this, which doesn't necessarily advocate for human extinction, but it's called the antinatalist.
It's not an offset of this. It's just that's fucking retarded. Okay, because they have a common end doesn't mean they have any other common origins or necessist. There's nothing in common except the end. Okay, which is, yes, reproduction is the first stupid crime. Okay, if you don't commit the first crime, there's no other crimes.
Movement. And essentially it is an argument that we should, for moral reasons, stop reproducing. And so a gentleman emailed the TV Atlas this week and said, I'm having a really difficult time going through the antinatalist argument from Asymmetry. And could you look at this and address it and tell me what's wrong with it? And I almost said no. I mean, I got videos to do. I'm streaming stuff on Twitch on occasion.
Oh, you're so fascinating, so fucking interesting, making the simplest of fucking arguments. Oh, don't be a fableist. Yeah, wow, how challenging. I'm gonna make the argument that you shouldn't be a deluded fableist and feel proud that, oh, I'm doing such, great work in the world. Defending this really complex theory that you shouldn't believe in fables.
Heading up stuff at the ACA. It's also holiday season, Christmas, Saturnalia, solstice, New Year's, all that stuff.
Oh, all your little, right, traditional bullshit. So you're eating their traditional meal and while you curse the origin of their celebration in the first place. The whole civilization has been perverted by this stupid pro-lifers, okay? The pro-life religion, the purpose from creation argument is the only argument that exists. There is no creation argument that makes any sense. There's no, you're stuck with Darwin's kind of poetry and just accepting the fact that, well, if you look at it, it's just absolutely disgusting, isn't it? That's the truth of it. If you look at it, it's a piece of shit. You're stuck with Monty Python songs, okay? Life's a piece of shit when you look at it. You're not looking very hard, shit for brain, especially through your little Christmas glasses and your little New Year's glasses, your little silly, I have to have my holiday time, blah, blah, blah glasses.
I'm not going to take time to dig through the antinatalist argument for asymmetry.
Well, then why don't you just go fuck yourself and say, I'm not going to make the answer. So you're answering antinatalism without answering one of its most respected authors. Isn't that complete horse shit? God. Pussy.
But I was bored, and I had a couple minutes.
Oh, okay.
And I went through it, and I realized it's actually, for me, and hopefully for some of you, an intriguing exercise in identifying fallacies in an argument. Because, as I pointed out in another video that I did this month...
Well, you're not going to find the fallacy in the basic argument that everything that's good sort of means preventing bad, right? I mean, it's good to be rich because being rich isn't being poor. Yeah, it's good to be healthy because being healthy isn't being sick. Duh.
It's actually rare that we get a proper syllogism. And I'm going to do this in a loose form of that syllogism. But the asymmetry argument for antinatalism essentially goes like this. Pain is bad. Pleasure is good.
And it's only good because it gets rid of bad, because it's the replacement for bad. If you don't have bad, the default is good. Okay, but it's only a default because there's no bad. It's the whip argument, okay? If the whip doesn't exist, okay, no whip is good, right? Whip is bad. No whip is good. Well, why is it good? Because it's not bad. Not because it's intrinsically good. So the only thing that's really a real thing is the bad. The bad is the only real thing. The good is just a consequence of the absence of the bad. That's the asymmetry. Bad has real material weight, and good is just the fact that you got rid of the weight. You took the straw off the camel's fucking back. Good. Thank you.
And we expand upon that idea to say the absence of pain is a good thing. And it's a good thing even if there's nobody to experience this absence of pain. Because if there's an experience...
Because it's prevention. Prevention is a real accomplishment. If something was going to happen without you doing the action, okay, like I removed the bacteria from your food and now you do not get sick, the fact is that you won't be sick, so yes, you won't be doing the bad thing that I prevented. Obviously. But it's still an obvious good that I prevented a bad. Duh! I mean, how can these assholes play this semantics game and try to, evade just the obvious? That, yes, good things will be not bad things. The not bad, the non-existence of the bad is good. Duh! And it's real.
And there's the presence of pain that would be bad, and so the absence of pain is a good. And at a minimum, the net pain goes to zero, rather than massively harmful to a person, but goes to zero if there's nobody to experience it. So pain is bad, pleasure is good. The absence of pain is good, even if there's nobody to experience it. The absence of pleasure is only bad if there is an experiencer.
Yes, it's only bad if they're going to be here in the ungood condition, which has to be bad. So if you're in ungood, it has to be by default bad. So they can't possibly exist without the good, because then they're existing in bad. So that's clearly bad. But if you prevent their existence, if you just don't play the stupid game, then you don't make the bad, then you don't have to fix the bad. So if you don't make a mess, you don't have to clean up the mess. No spilt milk, no milk to clean up, no problems. No Martians, no problem. No Venetians, no problem. No Uranians, no fucking goddamn problem. No Plutonians, no fucking goddamn problem. So I can just keep going through the entire, every speck of the fucking goddamn material universe, and I can make the argument to you that only somebody as sick and psychotic and stupid as Mengele would think it would be a good idea to create a system of organisms eating each other on any one of those planets. Only a fucking insane, sadistic lunatic would think it's a good idea. Let me make dinosaurs, and I'll make all this stuff, and they can stomp each other and squish each other's guts out and then suck each other's blood, and it'll be really cool. No, it'll be really sadistic, motherfucker. Just like you eating the Chinese right now, asshole. Oh, I can't help it. It's the way the society is. Yeah, it's the very thing you're defending. It's the very thing that would always be created by a bunch of selfish, needful organisms existing with each other. They will suck each other's goddamn blood. They will dig holes to each other's gold basements and steal each other's gold. They will do all of that shit. That's the liability of a bunch of needful machines. And you're taking no responsibility for that. I didn't make it, so I don't have to defend it. You are defending it, asshole. You're sitting here making an argument that there's some reason why people should be pro-life. There is no reason to be pro-life. No rational, logical reason to be pro-life. Impossible to defend as a rational construct. Life good. Not possible to defend as a theory. It's as garbage and as junk as God.
Actually, if someone exists and they are experiencing an absence of pleasure, that would be bad. If nobody exists, then the absence of pleasure is back at a dead needle zero, the same guy.
So he's saying if I make a planet covered with people that are being tortured, okay, tortured, organism, just plain torture, and that would so if I accept that, then it would be just as bad. He's saying just as bad to make a plant with nothing, because the good that we're losing is just as valuable as that negative. So if I prevented the negative, the torture, I am doing something just as good as it would be bad to prevent life, happy life on some planet. Because happy life has intrinsic fundamental value that's much greater than suffering. So by this logic, again, I can defend raping, I can defend any kind of pillage, because I could just make the argument that my happiness is so cool that it's worth their pain. That's his logic. He can do those exchanges. He has it's good logic. It sucks as logic. It's garbage.
And so this asymmetry in the argument is what they use to say, this is why we morally should stop reproducing.
Right, like because the Martians are somewhere in purgatory lamenting. They're suffering so horribly because they don't exist on Mars and they don't have a Donald Trump is their president. They don't have they don't have bald heads and cool lives, being really cool philosophical atheists. They're not doing all that cool stuff with their little micro penises. Fuck you. That's not happening. That's the asymmetry argument. There's no losing in giving up. There's no losing, but you can't define what got lost because there's no tragedy. You didn't spend 1 second of your life, you lying sack of fucking pig shit. You didn't spend 1 second of your life lamenting how horrible it is. There's no Martians on Mars. Boo-hoo, sad, sad. So don't pretend that you can make this argument that the good we're missing because we don't have tentacle people on Mars. Oh, that fantastic good is worth so fucking much. It's worth nothing. And you know it because you haven't missed it. You don't lament it. You don't even in any realistic way say to yourself, I really wish I could put tentacle people on Mars because our lives would be so much better. The universe would be such a beautiful place with tentacle people on Mars. You know that's a lie. You've never had that thought in your fucking life. So what are you pretending that your little diluted notions of accomplishment have anything to do with real pain and suffering that you're imposing without consent?
Because if humans don't exist, then there's no bad from the experience, the active experience of pain. And there's at least a dead zero neutral of an absence of pleasure. That sounds cool. Okay.
Yes, it's logical. That's right. It sounds perfectly reasonable. That's right. And if I really think about it, all the goods are really absences of bads. It's all the absence of a negative condition, not truly the existence of a positive condition. If I really think of my own desire mechanisms, what are they made out of? What am I relieving? I'm relieving my tensions and my lonelinesses and some sort of programmed bullshit that says, yeah, I need to, yeah, I need to polish certain parts of my parts with their parts. It's just bullshit compulsions. It doesn't have anything to do with any kind of real evaluation where I made some real calculation that I need to do this.
I'm convinced I'm not going to reproduce. Actually, it's really easy for me because I'm 50 now. I haven't had any kids. I can't have kids without scientific health, and I have no plans to have kids.
Wow, see, so he's he's totally dysfunctional, and he's defending life still, though, right? So here he is, a victim of his own dysfunction. He can't have kids without scientific help. I mean, so you're basically making the point. Oh, I would really appreciate it though if you really did have kids then, because I'd love to have crappy genetics. It's fantastic to get a good head start in life by having small nuts. I mean, it's just amazing. So these assholes, they can sit there and have cancer, have all kinds of liabilities, and they'll still sit there and defend it and say, yeah, give it to somebody else. They'll want to live my stupid life. No, I don't want to live your life. No, I don't want to be you. No, I don't want to be your fucking goddamn kid. You have no right to drag me from nowhere and drag me to be your fucking slave to your fucking silly notions. Okay? It's like them dragging me to their fucking churches. It's like them dragging me to their notion that I have to respect the fetus as a living spiritual being. I have no obligation. I should have no obligation to be obedient to your delusions, motherfucker. Keep them to your fucking self. Torture your fucking self. Do not torture other innocent organisms that have no obligation to play a stupid game that you have made some kind of accomplishment. It's not an accomplishment by reasoning, by facts. It's only an accomplishment by your fucking delusion.
But I don't want anybody thinking that I'm doing so because I've been convinced by the antinatalist argument. So let's dig in.
Right. So you've only been convinced by parts of it. You've been clearly convinced by parts of the argument that life is kind of dangerous. Life is kind of... You would have had kids if you thought automatically in your head, it's an automatic win. It's an automatic good idea. No problem. So just like putting life on Mars, you would put a bunch of conditions on it. You'd say, well, no, don't put life on Mars if it's just going to be dinosaurs and all that kind of crap and all these things eating each other. No, don't put life on Mars if that's all it's going to be. If it's just going to be great white sharks and octopuses, no, don't put life on Earth. That would be really stupid. Don't do it on Mars. Right? So you're conditional in what you would think this life has to accomplish or be to be worth it. All right, so you're already convinced by the argument that this isn't some kind of guaranteed win. Oh, I just make life and I'm winning. That's the fundamentals of the argument. The fundamentals of the argument start with the fact that you do not assume that it's productive. You have to argue and defend that it's productive. You have to point out how it's accomplishing something. And just like me pointing out to you that you've never, for a moment of your goddamn existence, sat there and it never occurred to you to say, oh yes, the universe is diminished because there is not stupid tentacle people on Mars. It never even occurred to you. That's how little chance that idea means anything.
First of all, pain is bad. No.
All right, well, too stupid, right? I mean, too fucking stupid. Yes, pain is bad in itself, in and of itself, the experience of it. If I put it in a jar and it accomplishes nothing else, it just has pain, you would say, yes, pain is bad. Don't do it. Don't turn on pain, right? If there was a jar and the button, and there's a button, you can turn the pain on, turn the pain off, and that's all it accomplished, right? It didn't stop more pain over here. It didn't clean the window so you could have a pleasant experience looking out the window. It didn't do anything else. All it accomplished was pain in a jar, and you have a button and it says on, off. Would you sit there and be stupid enough to argue that anybody should ever turn the pain bottle on? Would you, jackass? Fuckhead? Shitty philosopher? Dumb, doopy, idiotic moron? Why are you pretending to know anything about anything when you're too fucking stupid to even know that no, you would never turn the pain jar on? Nobody with any reasoning skills would ever turn the pain jar on unless by turning the pain jar on, you're turning another pain jar off. That would be the only reason anybody would ever turn the pain jar on, is to turn some other pain jar off. And you know it. If you thought about it, if you gave this subject 15 minutes of quiet meditative thought, that would have occurred to you. Instead, you say something absolutely idiotic, which is, no, pain isn't intrinsically bad. Of course it is intrinsically bad. That's why we know it. We experience it. I have been conscious for 60 fucking years. I know it's always bad. None of my pain was good. Okay? The lessons I might have learned from it was good. Some of the consequence might have been good. But the pain itself was bad. Always, asshole. I mean, you're a kindergarten philosopher, for fuck's sake. You have not evolved to understand what logic and reasoning is to make such an idiotic argument. I'm going to defend the notion of pain. I'm going to turn something that's bad into something good because it makes some other worst bad turn off. So I could use an animal in a brutal way and torture it to turn off a flood that was going to drown 1,000 other animals. And I could make this logical argument that says, well, look, if I don't torture this animal, those 1,000 are going to be tortured. And I could make the rational argument, I don't have a choice. But it doesn't make the torture of the one animal a good. It doesn't make its torture good. It just means that there's some worse thing, okay, that can happen. And so this little bad is better than the worse bad. And that's all you've demonstrated. But you, in just like any lying propagandist theist douchebag, have again broken vocabulary, attempted to sit there and make something it isn't into something it isn't, okay, make a fable into some kind of story with integrity. When it's just a stupid story. Oh, despicable. So anyway. And I'm only a third of the way through. So yeah, this will have to take, yeah, there'll have to be more than one part. Because it's just too fucking stupid. Ugh. Ugh.